I appreciate that. So we'll just put up the verse, and we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 13, Text 60. And this is the section of Brahma Vimohan Leela, as all of you are probably familiar with. I'll go to the translation, and then we'll read the purport. So Vrindavan is the transcendental abode of the Lord, where there is no hunger, anger, or thirst. Though naturally inimical, both human beings and fierce animals live there together in transcendental friendship. Once again, the translation, Vrindavan is the transcendental abode of the Lord, where there's no hunger, anger, or thirst. Though naturally inimical, both human beings and fierce animals live there together in transcendental friendship. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word vana means forest. We are afraid of the forest and do not wish to go there. But in Vrindavan, the forest animals are as good as demigods, for they have no envy. Even in this material world, in the forest, the animals live together, and when they go to drink water, they do not attack anyone. Envy develops because of sense gratification. But in Vrindavan, there's no sense gratification, for the only aim is Krishna's satisfaction. Even in this material world, the animals in Vrindavan are not envious of the sadhus who live there. The sadhus keep cows and supply milk to the tigers, saying, "Come here and take a little milk." Thus, envy and malice are unknown in Vrindavan. That is the difference between Vrindavan and the ordinary world. We are horrified to hear the name of Vana, the forest, but in Vrindavan, there's no such horror. Everyone there is happy by pleasing Krishna. Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Paro. Whether a Goswami or a tiger or other ferocious animal, everyone's business is the same, to please Krishna. Even the tigers are also devotees. This is the specific qualification of Vrindavan. In Vrindavan, everyone is happy. The calf is happy, the cat is happy, the dog is happy, the man is happy, everyone. Everyone wants to serve Krishna in a different capacity, and thus there's no envy. One may sometimes think that the monkeys in Vrindavan are envious because they cause mischief and steal food. But in Vrindavan, we find that the monkeys are allowed to take butter, which Krishna himself distributes. Krishna personally demonstrates that everyone has the right to live. This is Vrindavan life. Why should I live and you die? No, that is material life. The inhabitants of Vrindavan think, whatever is given by Krishna, let us divide it as prasad and eat. This mentality cannot appear all of a sudden, but it will gradually develop with Krishna consciousness. By sadhana, one can come to this platform. In the material world, one may collect funds all over the world in order to distribute food freely. Yet those to whom the food is given may not even feel appreciative. The value of Krishna consciousness, however, will gradually be very much appreciated. For instance, in an article about the temple of the Hare Krishna movement in Durban, South Africa, the Durban Post reported, all the devotees here are very active in the service of Lord Krishna, and the results are obvious to see. Happiness, good health, peace of mind, and the development of all good qualities. This is the nature of Vrindavan. Harva abhaktasya kuto mada guna. Without Krishna consciousness, happiness is impossible. One may struggle, but one cannot have happiness. We are therefore trying to give human society the opportunity for a life of happiness, good health, peace of mind, and all good qualities through God consciousness. I'll read that last line again, very wonderful. We're trying to give human society the opportunity for a life of happiness, good health, peace of mind, and all good qualities through God consciousness. Okay, do some invocation prayers and we can go into the verse and dissect it and see what so much great meaning that Srila Prabhupada dissects in the purport that we can talk about. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantamirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Srinivadi Pashatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinda Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Panchakalpa Trubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. It's so good to be with all of you and see many familiar faces on here, some new faces. Always so nice to be part of this community where there's such an eagerness to hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, to hear from ancient wisdom that we have, the storehouse of wisdom that we have in our Vedic knowledge, and see how this applies to our life every day in our pursuit of Krishna consciousness, and find the deeper meaning that we can apply in our life, in our spiritual evolution. And this verse is really special. This past time was just reading this chapter over the weekend, and Srila Prabhupada gave so many wonderful purports for each of these verses. Actually, it's really beautiful. And this section that we're reading from is the Brahma Vimohan Lila. And obviously we're toward the end of this section, this chapter. And this is where, just to recap very briefly, I know all of you are familiar with it. Lord Brahma decides to test Krishna, and he hides some of the calves, the calves, and the coward boys. And Krishna expands himself in Vishnu Tattva, much to the bewilderment of Brahma, for 1 year, full year. And he expands himself as these calves and these coward boys. And Lord Brahma gets bewildered. And this section is where he's looking around and he's trying to understand what's going on. He's trying to understand Krishna's mystic power. And he's bewildered. He's thinking, were the cows the calves and the coward boys in the cave, are they real? Or the ones with Krishna, are they real? And he's not able to really figure this out. And in this verse, he's looking and he's understanding even Sri Vrindavan Dham. And this verse is talking about Vrindavan Dham and the qualities of the Dham. And this verse is really giving us the code. In this, I was thinking that this verse gives us the code of how to actually approach the Dham, the mindset that we need to approach the Dham. We really want to enter it. And another reason why this verse is special is that I was just reflecting, actually, that when Srila Prabhupada passed away, he was actually translating just very section of Srimad Bhagavatam, actually. I think just a few verses down was the last verse that he had personally translated before he left this planet. So it's very special. It's a very special section. He was describing Krishna, Brahma's prayers to Krishna, from what I recall, when he left in November of 1977 in Sri Vrindavan Dham itself. So a couple things in this verse that I wanted to highlight, and then want to open it up for comments, concerns, thoughts, all of that as well. A couple things. One is, there's a couple points made, and I'll read the translation once again. Can everyone see my screen here? 1 second. Okay, maybe not. So I'll just read the translation once again. Vrindavan is the transcendental abode of the Lord, where there's no hunger, anger, or thirst. Though naturally inimical, both human beings and fierce animals live there together in transcendental friendship. So the first distinction that's made here is that in the material world, there's a distinction between animals and the humans, right? And in Vrindavan, there's not so much of a distinction, because these animals are not ordinary souls. They're actually evolved souls. And as the verse says, that they have no envy toward each other, the humans and the animals in Shiva and Dham. And this is a characteristic for entering the Dham, actually, that we've really got to either have no envy or really be working on our envy, actually, to actually enter the Dham. And the first distinction that we can make is between animals and humans. And Srila Prabhupada makes this distinction so many places in many different books of his, where he talks about how animal life is eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and how we can get wrapped into the same situation that's part of human life as well, but we have an opportunity to go deeper in human life, to go beyond just eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And the animals, they work on an automatic response, right? Animals, if you look at the neuroscience of the animal brain, these activities are going on automatically: eating, sleeping, mating, defending. And like, for example, if you attack an animal, it will respond, it'll defend itself naturally, it will attack you. All this is working on autopilot. But from a human perspective and from a spiritual perspective, we have an opportunity to go beyond this, to ask deeper questions, to ask, who is Krishna, who is God, what is our purpose here, and to develop the right qualities to enter into Shiva and Dham. And so the animals, they're the first distinction that's made. The animals there are no different than demigods. They're not just ordinary animals, but they're actually evolved yogis, right? They have no envy. And then now on this point of envy, we've talked about it many times, and it comes up so much through the Srimad Bhagavatam, through even the Gita, this point. But I was thinking there's a big distinction, and Srila Prabhupada makes this, between Vrindavan life, or spiritual life, and material life. He makes a distinction. And material life is based off our ego. And spiritual life is based off our heart. Two very different worlds, right? We have our ego and we have our heart. And I want to talk about this in more depth as we go through this topic in this verse. And Srila Prabhupada makes this point that material life is based off envy. It's based off envy. These qualities are qualities of the ego. And he makes this point in the verse, in the purport, that envy develops due to sense gratification. And what does that mean? That means that when we feel that someone's a threat to us, when we want to be the enjoyer, the center of everything, then we view others as threats to that enjoyment, right? Threats to our control, our power, our domination. Whether it's we want something that someone has, maybe it's name, fame, validation from others, right? Recognition from others of our incredibleness, our recognition of our talent and our skills, right? All of that. There's a sense of envy that can develop when we have this mindset that we have to be in the center, that we have to be recognized and appreciated. Of course, wanting to be appreciated is natural, but then they can quickly go into envy if we're not careful. And I was thinking that, and Srila Prabhupada mentions this, envy develops from sense gratification, that I was thinking that envy really comes from this sense of scarcity within. When we feel a lack within ourselves, that's where envy develops. Because we feel like there's something that we need from others, that we need to compete with from others. And then it also develops as a desire to play God, to be Krishna, to want to be Krishna, right? We want to be in the center. And one of the things that's very dangerous, and Srila Prabhupada mentioned this in the purport as well, he says that Krishna personally demonstrates that everyone has the right to live. This is Vrindavan life. Why should I live and you die? No, that is material life. He makes this point. And this is exactly this point of envy, that when we begin to get in this mindset, we start to compete with others, and we find life, whether it's spiritual life or material life. Now, this is a quality of material life, we can still see it in our spiritual life if we're not careful in our communities, that we develop this mentality of a zero-sum game, right? If someone else wins, we lose. If we win, someone else loses. That's how we begin to think. But when we shift our mindset to not of the scarcity, but more of seeing Krishna's abundance everywhere and our service to him everywhere, we start to graduate from this mindset of feeling envy. We see there's opportunity everywhere to serve, actually. And Krishna is always providing some level of facility for us. So we can see all the blessings that we have in our life. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is that for us to enter into Krishna's pastimes and actually understand them, Prabhupada is saying that we have to understand what Vrindavan life means, what this means, and cultivate the right mindset of the Vrajvasis. What's the actual mindset of the Vrajvasis and of the true Vaishnava and spiritualist to actually enter into this pastime and to actually understand that's actually half the battle, half the journey, to develop this mindset, or you could even say the whole journey, to develop that so we can enter into the Dham. So as we apply this into our life, we can think about material life that's based off envy. Very much so. We see in the secular world, there's always a competition, a dog-eat-dog world, they say, right? There's always this competition of being superior and being powerful and being in control, and everything is based off that. Everything is based off that. Our education, our talents, our skills, our intelligence, our beauty, whatever we have, this opulences that we have to some levels, some degree, obviously not to the extent that Krishna has, but all of that is in the name of competition, right? Of this envy, of this ego. Spiritual life represents a complete shift, 180-degree shift, where we can have those skills, talents, that intelligence, that education, but the idea is to serve with it. It's to serve Krishna. It's not for our self-aggrandizement, but it's to serve Krishna and to serve society, to serve each other. And so let's also apply this to ourselves. Where are we stifling ourselves? Where does this mentality of envy come up in our own heart, in our own mind? If we're very honest, I'm sure all of us, I know I can speak for myself, sometimes feel envious of others, sometimes feel jealous of others. And it stifles my own connection and my own relationship sometimes to Krishna and the Vaishnavas. So let's reflect on that. And sometimes we think that the material world, the secular world, is dealing with these issues, and I'm not dealing with it because we're in the spiritual community and we're on the spiritual path. But actually, sometimes we have to be even more mindful of these things, because as we do the work of cleansing our heart, some of these things come out even more initially. And so we have to be really mindful. And the other part that I was thinking is that we have these emotions, right? Like, for example, envy is an emotion. And sometimes we think about, how do I engage this in service? And Prabhupada talks about this point. So we can establish that there's a distinction between the animals and humans in this world. In Vrindavan, not as much of a distinction, because the animals are as good as demigods, as it said. We talked about this point of envy and how in Vrindavan there's no envy, right? That could seem like a lofty ideal. How do we rid ourselves of all envy? It's challenging. It's very challenging. And we talked about where this desire of this envy comes from. Now, how do we deal with these emotions? And in the spiritual world, it said, and I heard this so much growing up in our movement, that the spiritual world is a so the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world, and it's a perverted reflection of it. So things that we see in this world, we can actually understand them at a deeper level to see how they're actually applied in the spiritual world. So envy is actually applied in the spiritual world as well. So that on one level, you can say there's no envy in the spiritual world, because that advanced consciousness is there, where there's a desire to see everyone flourish. But in another sense, you could also see how we can use these emotions and how devotees use these emotions to serve Krishna. Because in our philosophy, we're not voidist, we're not impersonal. We don't need to totally suppress or sniff out these emotions, right? As we can see in Krishna's pastimes with the cowherd boys, with the gopis, with even the demons, there's so many emotions. It's so rich with activity, with flavor, right? With raga. And so that's our philosophy is very personal, and it's based off emotion. So we don't want to just be mindful, we want to be heartful. And all our emotions come from our heart. And so how can envy be used? And I was thinking that actually all of these anarthas, so to speak, can be used to serve Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada mentions this actually in the second verse of this same chapter. He mentions that, so the second verse, chapter 13, text 2, that kama, desires, krodha, anger, and bhaya, fear, are always present in the material world. But in the spiritual or transcendental world, one can use them for Krishna. Then also, I was reading this wonderful verse. This is in the 7th canto, chapter 9, text 1. And Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport that Narottam Das Thakur has sung in Prema Bhakti Chandrika that Krodha Bhakta Dvesha Jane, anger should be used to punish a demon who is envious of the devotees. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, and Matsarya, lust, anger, greed, illusion, pride, and envy, all have their proper use for the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotee. So they have their proper use. So we can use all these emotions to serve Krishna. So we can look at, for example, envy. In the highest sense, envy can help us compete with each other to serve Krishna more, if we really look at it. Right? There's spiritual envy. There's envy of the material world, which is I want to be better than you, to put you down, to assert my superiority. And then there's envy used if we apply this 180-degree spiritual approach, right? Envy can be used in a spiritual sense to compete to serve Krishna. Who can serve Krishna the best? Who can serve the devotees the best? Not in a way to put anyone down, but to enhance the service that's already being performed, to enhance the emotion that's already there. Krodha, we talked about that, and this example is given that Srila talks about to protect the devotees. Anger is used for protection. Lord Nrsingadev is very angry. He's very angry, but he's there to protect Prahlad Maharaj. The anger is used to protect. And just like, for example, if someone was to harm one of your loved ones or someone that you very much care about, and you were just like, and you didn't have any anger or any response to that, that might be concerning in itself, right? Anger is a natural response to feeling protective. And so we can use this spiritually as well. We can see that anger is very much, can be used, right? To protect the devotees, to protect ourselves, to practice spiritual life peacefully, and then also to serve Krishna. You have different anarthas you can use, whether it's greed, lobha, that can be really motivation to grow spiritually. You have the spiritual greed to want to understand, to grow, to learn, and to serve. Right? So all of these can be used. Even we have moha, which is illusion, and that can be seen through the Yogamaya potency of Krishna. We see Mother Yashoda, who's always, she knows Krishna's her child, who's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When she sees the universe in his mouth, all the universes, but then she forgets, because that's her bhava with Krishna, her rasa, right? And so she's an illusion, you could say, spiritually speaking, but she's actually highly elevated. And so I want to make this point that sometimes we think that these emotions are bad, but actually it's how do we repurpose them, shift our entire mindset from one of I'm the controller, I'm the center, and these emotions being used in the material sense through our ego, filtered through this lens of our ego, to really just bolster our insecurity, our sense of self, versus how do we use these to serve Krishna, Radha and Krishna, Rashi Radha Muralidhar, and the Vaishnavas? It's a very different mindset. And those in Vrindavan, the Vrajvasis, they've mastered their emotions to perfectly harmonize the will of Krishna. They've really mastered that art of how do we serve Krishna? What does Krishna need and want in this moment? And how do I serve him exactly the way he wants to be served? And to enhance the mood in Vrindavan, the activities of Vrindavan, the emotions of those in Vrindavan, the pastimes. And so it's not that, sometimes our emotions in the material sense, they stifle activities, right? So we might be, let's say we're organizing something, we're leading some endeavor, some center, some program. And we can see, if we're very honest, that often our emotions can stifle the connection, right? Our ego can get in the way. Someone said something, we're offended, we don't like certain devotee, maybe there's some tension, and we haven't worked through our part potentially. And then it can stifle everything. But in Vrindavan Dham, the devotees have mastered the art, and the Vrajvasis have mastered the art of serving Krishna and using their emotions not to stifle, but to enhance the mood in the Dham. And how do we get there? How do we get to that point? I think Srila Prabhupada makes this point in this purport, that he says that this happens gradually. It's not something that we can just turn on and off. And sometimes it happens quickly, but it happens gradually through sadhana. He mentions this point. The sadhana and the process of anartha nivritti, of really working through what we need to work through, cleansing the mirror of our mind, of our heart. That's how we gradually get there. This mindset, he says, has to be practiced over time, and then we can achieve this mindset. It's a lofty goal, but it's also a very achievable goal as well. So those are some points I wanted to make. And one other point that I wanted to make, a couple, just to wrap up, we talked about a couple different things. One is in dealing with envy. Srila Prabhupada also talks about how to deal with it. And he mentions this point in the verse. Let me see if I can just pull it up here, which I really appreciated. So here he's talking about, as we've mentioned, this is Vrindavan life. Why should I live and you die? No, this is material life, right? This zero-sum game that we have. But the inhabitants of Vrindavan think whatever's given by Krishna, let us divide it as prasad and eat. And this point that we just talked about, this mentality cannot appear all of a sudden, but will gradually develop with Krishna consciousness. By sadhana, one can come to this platform. So we've got to work on it day by day. So we have that there. And then the point that I wanted to make here, so he talks about envy and how there's really no actual envy in Vrindavan. And how do we deal with this envy? Srila Prabhupada also gives us the formula here. He says, everyone wants to serve Krishna in a different capacity, and thus there's no envy. Everyone wants to serve Krishna in a different capacity. When we appreciate what we can do and serve Krishna in that way, and we appreciate other devotees and Vaishnavas and even other groups for what they're doing, then we become less envious of others, actually, when we're appreciative, because all of us have been given some level of talent and skill and gifts by Krishna to serve him, to serve Radha Muralidhar. And if we're appreciative of what we have and what others have, they're all different. For example, there's certain things I'm not very good at that I see many other devotees are very good at. And there's things that I might have some skills in as well, that I have some skills in. And being able to appreciate the different capacities, as Srila Prabhupada says. Everyone has a different capacity, different skills, different proclivity, different ability, even the amount that they can do. And no one is better or worse than another. It actually depends on our heart and how we're actually offering that to Krishna. So if we're appreciative of that, then we can actually deal with this envy. And often envy can develop toward people that do the same thing as us, actually, if we are aware of it. And so we have to be mindful of that too, that those who have similar capacity to us, who have the similar talents and skills, maybe we can get envious of them particularly. So just to wrap up here, Lord Brahma wanted to test Krishna, and now he's kind of getting the results of that test of seeing Krishna's mystic potency and how powerful Krishna is. And he, you could say that in some ways, and this is a pastime, but Lord Brahma lost sight. He kind of lost sight of Krishna and how powerful Krishna was. And I was thinking that, in this pastime, if Lord Brahma could do that, and Lord Brahma has created the universes and he's highly evolved, then what about us? What about us? Sometimes we do one thing and we do two things and we do a couple of things and many devotees are appreciative, many people are appreciative, and then we lose our marbles, right? We get so excited, we get puffed up, actually. We think that we're only doing it and we're the ones that are the controllers and the doers, when that's actually not the case. And so I wanted us I want to leave us with this final reflection that if Lord Brahma could lose sight, then what about us? Right? He's creating so many universes, so many things are happening across planetary systems due to his grace, right? Just even one glance of his, things are created. What to speak of us, we have to actually endeavor. But Lord Brahma, just by his glance, things are being created and moving in this world. So we have to be very careful. And in the 15th verse of this chapter, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that everyone from Brahma down to the small insect must take lessons from Krishna. He mentions this point, that everyone from Brahma down to the smallest insect must take lessons from Krishna. So I want to leave us with this, that how can we reflect on what lessons Krishna is giving us in our life right now? Because the things that are going well and the things that are not going so well, they're all lessons. Krishna, actually, they're all lessons. Whether it's our sadhana, our service, our health, our relationships personally with our community, with the Vaishnavas, our career, our purpose, all of that can be seen in Krishna consciousness. And all of that can be seen through the lens of these lessons that Krishna is giving us, right? So Lord Brahma had his lesson. We have our lessons every day. And how can we see the lessons and use those lessons and get the lessons that we need, actually extract them and grow from those lessons? We need to actually honestly take stock and grow from that. I was just thinking that in the school of life, often we get the exam first and then from Krishna, and then we get the lesson after. We get the exam first and the lesson after. So it's a difficult situation. But if we're very diligent and we're thoughtful and we're very diligent in our sadhana, in our reflection as a spiritual practice, then we can learn and grow through time and avoid the same mistakes that we've made in the past. So I want to end there. We talked about a couple different things. We talked about distinction between the animals and humans, particularly in this world, and then in Vrindavan, very different. We talked about material consciousness, which is based off the ego. And we talked about spiritual consciousness, which is based off the heart. We talked about envy as it relates to this world, the zero-sum game that we often find in this world of envy. If I win, you lose, I win, versus adopting this mindset the Vrajvasis have of we all win, actually, and we're here to serve Krishna. Krishna winning is all of us winning. And it's a big shift. We talked about envy and this desire to play God, want validation, whether it's name, fame, money, recognition, all of that. And how this comes from a sense of scarcity within. And how we can shift this consciousness to this more spiritual consciousness of Vrindavan, because this material world is a perverted reflection of the material world. It's an inaccurate reflection. How these emotions are all part of our life, even in our spiritual life. It's not that we lose emotion in Vrindavan Dham. We see in our Krishna's pastimes, there's so many emotions. How can we use these and transform these emotions instead of being ruled by them? How can we transform them to serve Krishna and the devotees and each other in a way that's actually supportive and life-giving versus destructive. And how often in material consciousness, these emotions stifle connection, they stifle creation, they stifle moving forward in a healthy way if we're not very mindful of them. But if we transform them and utilize them in the highest way, we can actually be very helpful in our connections to Krishna and each other. And then talked about this final reflection around Brahma, him being so exalted and him also being confused and bewildered, and thinking about us and how we could also fall into that trap. So I want to end there. Take any questions, any comments, any thoughts.
Thank you, Anuj Prabhu. Beautiful class. Just a quick reflection. Krishna is so wonderful that he is allowing us to use envy in his service. Envy is the ultimate envy is that we're envious of Krishna. We want to replace him and become God. But he's so kind and compassionate that he's allowing us to apply envy in devotional service and compete with each other to serve him. Thank you. That's a great point.
I have to hop up real quick to go to teach, but just want to say, Anuj, such as always, such a wonderful class, practical, inspirational. And in this whole last chapter, I keep reflecting. I'm remembering the backdrop of this, that Prabhupada is on his back, emaciated, whispering into a microphone, all this with such clarity. And like his seeing it, Vrindavan, I can almost see him seeing it in his mind. And he is really showing, not just in his words, but showing us through his actions right now. The spirit of Vrindavan is to go and please Krishna. He could have been lying on his back, having people fan him right now, right? But instead, here he is, like serving Krishna, like to literally his last breath. So I've just been all these things coming up, and you put it so beautifully, making this point of this is what Vrindavan is, and both in his words and in his actions, he's given it to us. So thanks so much, Anuj.
Of course, thank you so much.
Yes,
thank you.
yes, hi. Great class, and I agree with you. Envy is the cause of almost all sins, like murder, theft. A lot of times stems from envy. When you mention spiritual envy, I agree with you. You want to be more spiritually advanced, but can't it be a little dangerous? Like one temple tries to say, I'm better, I'm observing Krishna better than you, or I'm a better devotee than you. Like, you can't spiritual envy still result in the sort of dangerous kind of envy?
It can. So that's where it's a slippery slope between material envy and spiritual envy. Because in that example you gave, it's still material, because there's still based off the ego. So that's the qualification where I'm better than you are, right? So whenever that mindset comes in, even if the activity is spiritual, then there's still danger there of that mindset really creeping in and being very dangerous. The supportive mindset underneath that is not that I'm better than you, it's that I'm so happy to be serving alongside with you. And that's a very different shift from my temple is better than yours because we distributed X books. There's an example that was given that I just heard recently, actually, which I feel like covers this in many ways. But I think the devotees in India were speaking to Radhanath Maharaj, and they were mentioning to him that there was this Gita marathon or book distribution marathon. And they had a goal to distribute 100,000 books of Srila Prabhupada. And it's a lofty goal, it's a great goal, and everyone got very excited about it. And they asked Maharaj, said, do we have your blessings? Can we do this? And what do you think? And we're going to be having a little competition amongst the temples, to see who can distribute the most books. And this is what I had heard, this is just a couple of days ago, that Maharaj had said, and it was such a nice response. He said that, I pray that we achieve the 100,000 and more, and that we come in last place in this competition. Because what that means is that if we come in last place, that everyone else has done incredible as well and has superseded that, right? So it's not this competition. The word competition actually comes from conspire, which means conspiring to make each other better. but it's the underlying mindset of what that conspiring is. If there's this egotistical mindset of I'm going to dominate you or I'm better than you, which comes from this insecurity, then it's dangerous. But if it comes from this mindset of I'm so happy to be serving alongside you, and you're inspiring me, you're motivating me, and I'm appreciative of you, then there's no danger to it, actually, because then we can actually conspire to help each other grow spiritually. So hope that answers your question, Prabhu.
Thank you. Okay, we are unleashing our questionnaire, Kartik Prabhu. Kartik Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. It's a very wonderful class. A lot to reflect on. This is a question from yesterday, like about Brahma's bewilderment in this pastime.
Yeah.
So he, from what I understand, he kind of prays before Krishna is born. He prays and comes on status with other demigods. So he clearly knows who Krishna is, right? So but then just 5 years later in this pastime, which is like 5 moments in Brahmaloka, he is like, he says, I don't know who Krishna is. I need to test him.
Yeah.
So how quickly he became bewildered, and I'm kind of just curious what you have, if you have any reflections on that. Thank you.
Yeah, you can look at it in multiple ways. And, there are many other qualified Vaishnavas who are more qualified than me to probably answer this. And thank you for that question. So please also, other devotees, chime in. You can look at it in 2 ways. One is that this is a pastime. And you can see that for Krishna's pastimes, many different things happened, right? Many devotees are also put into illusion or under the potency of Yogamaya. And so that's one way to look at it. But also is that even with the pastime of Indra and the Govardhan hill, Krishna's pastimes are confusing, for even some of the demigods, because they're seeing Krishna, this young little boy, so charming and so powerful. And so there's this desire to almost test that and to forget that Krishna is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because if we actually understand Krishna, I think that Krishna's he's God with his guard down, right? Like you have Lord Vishnu in his opulence, right? You have Lord Nrsingadev, who's very ferocious to appear, and everyone can almost accept that that's God, in many ways, because our conception of God is one of awe and reverence, that mindset of awe and reverence, that we're seeing God, that we're worshiping God, that we're paying our respects, even across different traditions around the world. That's generally the conception of God. But with Krishna, that's not necessarily that's not the end all be all at all, right? That's just one way to approach Krishna, but really that's the way to approach Vishnu. We can see different forms of Vishnu and other forms of God and divinity. With Krishna is a very intimate relationship, whether it's Madhurya Ras, whether it's Vatsalya, whether it's Sakya, all of those are, and even Dasya to some extent, is a lot more intimate. All those are very intimate. Obviously, going up and graduating in Madhurya Ras. And so it's very bewildering to see. So you can see from that. So for Lord Brahma, he's seeing all this and he's thinking, well, is this really God? Like, I'm not understanding. I mean, he's just playing with the cowherd boys and having lunch, and they have the pastime of Agasura. He's being bewildered by all these things. And I think it's mentioned in the beginning of this chapter that he sees the Agasura pastime and he's a bit bewildered by that pastime. And so that's the way to look at it. I would say if anyone else wants to also jump in, hope that answers your question, Prabhu.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. Prabhu, you're on mute. Anand Bihar, Prabhu.
Sorry, I was glorifying Kartik's ability to ask a very intelligent question and great answer. Thank you. Time to greet the Lord. Stand up, everybody. Please, if you can, greet the Lord. Turn your camera on. Bruce, stop your car. Anuj Prabhu, thank you very much. We'd like to go over time just a little bit. Do we have any other reflections? I really love the idea of competing with other devotees. Bhima Prabhu, who would you like to compete with in serving Krishna? On this call, is there a devotee you'd like to compete with?
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
I'm competing with myself. I'd like to compete with Adi Purush for working 24 hours a day. Actually, I don't want to compete. I so don't want to do that. I can't
Yeah,
compete.
because
This is what
Adi will beat you.
Yes, he will. Listen, I actually had this thought this morning. I got up and I said to myself, I don't know what got me on it. It's something I was thinking about loveliness. And then I thought, all the devotees, especially at the Bhakti Center, because I see you guys every day and I've seen everyone, the Matajis, the Prabhujis, everybody is so lovely. Everybody's so lovely. And then I see myself in the mirror and I say, oh, I can't wait to take birth again as a lovely devotee who hopefully will be like a child of one of the Bhakti Center. So I have a chance. But I just think, I said to myself, somehow I need to have a platform to tell all the devotees of how lovely they all are. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Bhima Prabhu. You're hilarious. Okay, who would like to go next? Reflections. Unmute yourself. Andrea Draupadi, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, I just wanted to reflect that I always appreciate Anuj Sharma Prabhu's classes because he gives very practical applications to high philosophical kind of thinking. And I really saw how he said that if we switch to seeing Krishna's abundance everywhere, that's a really great way to kind of counteract the envy that is just so easy for us to experience. So I think it's like an ongoing theme that we've been on about gratitude and the importance of gratitude and seeing Krishna's abundance around us to help us kind of counteract those, less helpful feelings like envy and malice, things of that sort. So that was my reflection. Thank you so much, Anuj Prabhu.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, when it comes to Krishna consciousness, there's no question of scarcity, right, Anuj Prabhu? There's no shortage of devotional service, Adi Purusha Prabhu says.
Yeah, I was just reflecting as you were saying that, Andrea, Prabhu, that like in this material world, people always want something from you. There's always like this sense, or you're either wanting something from someone else in like the material state of life. So there's this competition. But like when we actually have an opportunity to be around devotees and pure devotees, they don't want anything from us. And it's actually disarming to begin with, because we're thinking, we're so used to that material consciousness, that envy, that competition, that it's actually alarming to begin with. But then we realize that's actually what life needs to be, where we can actually be genuinely happy for each other, for one another, and come from that place, like you said, abundance versus this scarcity. Thank you.
Nice. Adi Purusha Prabhu, you still here? Would you like to reflect?
Yeah, he explained it very nicely. The idea that these things, it says Prabhupada says there's everything in the spiritual world. There's competition, there's laughter, but it's without material inebriety. In other words, there's a softening, just like instead of envy, it's like admiration. Right? It's very sweet.
form of wanting to take from the. He explained it very nicely, and we just a slight refinement. The my no envy.
Adipurusha Prabhu, you're breaking
Yeah.
up. What was the slight refinement?
Can you hear me?
You're breaking up. I think you're in the elevator.
Yeah. The Mayavadis, they want to get rid of the ego, right? Because the rock has no envy. But we're not Mayavadis. We want to get rid of the false ego and see the true self, which is a loving being in devotional service to Krishna. And Prabhupada gives the analogy about if you have a pond and you throw a rock in here and a rock in there and a rock over here, all the ripples are going out and they bounce off each other. But if all the rocks are going in the same place, then the circles are concentric. So as long as we keep Krishna in the center, we're not bouncing off each other. There's a harmony, the atmosphere of love. And I like what you said, Krishna is so wonderful. And he's reminding us that there's another quality of existence and that we can return to that. Hare Krishna. Over to Prabhupada.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. That's very true. False ego. Throw that word
False
in. Yes, because ego, yes, we have our identity. You're absolutely correct. Thank you for that.
Rich Bhakti.
Hare Krishna. Something very enlightening and reassuring to me from today's class. We bless you. We read in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, whatever you do, whatever you offer, make it a sacrifice to me. And I feel like oftentimes when that verse is discussed, the conversation goes something like, well, if you're a great musician, like Adipurusha perhaps, or if you're a great dancer like Shampakalata or Jamuna Jaya, or if you're possessed of great wit like Ananda Bahari, or if you are a great rhetoric, if you may speak beautifully and rhetorically like our field hand philosopher Bhima, use that gift in service of Krishna. And I often think, well, I don't know that I have any particular skills or talents, but today we're discussing how even our emotions, even these things that may seem base, that we often think that it's our responsibility to negate, like our anger or our fear or our greed, even these things can be engaged in Krishna's service if they're used in the right way. And I'm like, well, I've got a lot of that stuff. I may not have any talents, but I certainly have these emotions. And it's like I said, it's reassuring and enlightening to think, wow, these things, anything can be engaged in Krishna's service. And thank you for that reminder to us untalented and sometimes uninspired folks that we all can do this. And then one other thing, I often read these long passages in Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. It'll be this page-long passage. There's all these lists of great virtues that we should cultivate, or there will be these very eloquent and poignant descriptions of what is Maya, or what are the modes of passion and ignorance characterized. I'm like, yeah, I want all those virtues, or I'm filled with all of those vices. How to do that? And sometimes I'll try to take them all in my hands at once, and it's just like this big pile of Jenga blocks that I can't carry, and it keeps on falling down on me. And then I think to the last line in today's purport, and it went something like, I don't have it in front of me, but it went something like, our movement is aimed at bringing people all good qualities through God consciousness. And I remember, that's right, through sadhana, through devotional service, through surrender, knowledge, detachment, all these virtues all these vices you want to rid yourself of, that all comes automatically. That's just a byproduct of your simple, sincere service. So I'm like, okay, thank goodness in this age of faults that we have the names, that we can just bow our heads and chant the Lord's names, and all good things will come. All good qualities will reveal themselves. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Wow, Rich, that was beautiful. Right, Anuj Prabhu, aren't you impressed by our rich bhakti?
Yeah, no, that was deep and powerful reflections. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one more. Would anyone like to contribute by reflecting? You can't compete with Reach in reflecting, but you can try.
We can
All
complete
right.
reflections to share the best reflections.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Anuj Sharma. Very nice, practical, thought-provoking, engaging class. We see that you come prepared, inspired, dressed up. The room is clean. We don't know what's in the closet, but it looks pristine.
The
Yeah,
closet
thank
has
you
a
very
couple
much.
things in there that need cleaning. I will say that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Prabhu. Great class as always. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating, for keeping your cameras on, keeping the cameras off. We know you're there, giving us your attention, your most valuable asset. Thank you very much. Shrimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Engage in everything in God's service ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. I'm in the closet. I thought I was on the couch, but I'm in the closet. All right.